Welcome to Experts Unleashed, a podcast that aims to uncover how professionals and entrepreneurs transform their experience into income while making a positive impact in the world. I'm your host, Joel Irway, and over the past 4 years, I've helped entrepreneurs develop and launch their expert-based businesses to grow past 6 and 7 figures per year. Now, a professional expert serves their community through paid training, education, or service, and this podcast will show you how to design and execute your plan to become a 6 or 7 figure expert without a big team. So, let's get started. Hey, what's going on, experts? Welcome to another episode of Experts Unleashed. And today you are in for a very special treat. I just hopped off my interview with Tricia Brouk from the Big Talk. And this episode was very fascinating. I have yet to speak with somebody who is a creative professional, as is Tricia, who has been on the production side and the directing side, and even on the performing side. She comes from a background of performing arts, and now she is the executive producer for TEDx Lincoln Square in New York City. So I was really fascinated to talk about what she has done and how her business has transformed from the start, and the different types of skills that have made her successful. Now, towards the end of the interview today, I finally found the connection between the two of us, because I always try to build that connection of skill sets. And she talks about something very, very important that is relevant to everybody who wants to be successful and make a deep connection with other people, whether it's clients, whether it's just other relationships that you have in your life and in your business. And it's super, super important. So make sure that you pay attention to the end. So without further ado, let's jump right into today's episode. I know you're going to love it. Tricia, welcome to the show. How are you doing? You excited?
I am so excited to be here with you, Joel. Thank you for having me.
We just finished up our pre-podcast interview, and I got to admit, we're going to have a lot of fun with this one, right? Because I go deep into stories. I love to uncover opportunities, figure out where the opportunities were that came up for you to pivot from, what made you successful here to what made you successful there, and the whole 9 yards. So before we jump into the background, give our audience a little bit of history, or not history, but tell us what you do, right? I'm stumbling over my words today, so forgive me.
No worries at all, Joel. So I live in New York City. I'm in showbiz. I'm a director, writer, choreographer, producer. I work in film, television, and theater. I'm the executive producer of TEDx Lincoln Square. And my company, The Big Talk, is where I apply my expertise to the art of public speaking. I also have a podcast called The Big Talk, where I interview people who talk for a living.
So how long have you been doing this? How long has The Big Talk been around?
It's been around for 2 years. It's a very new baby.
Very new baby. Awesome. Fantastic. So what I want to do is I always like to rewind it, right? So here's what you do now. You're super successful. Got a lot of great substance behind your company right now. And let's rewind it. I want to start with the start of your expertise, right? So you said you came from Missouri and you're living in New York City now. Give me a little bit of background about that and what brought you to New York City. And let's just start there.
You got it, Joel. So I have always been a dancer. I grew up knowing I was going to leave Missouri and move to New York City to pursue my career in dance. I knew I was going to dance with Baryshnikov one day, and I did. So I moved here knowing that I was going to do that, and I was going to make it happen no matter what. But I also was very clear that I had no interest in being a starving artist. So early on, I got myself hired at New York Health and Racquet as a personal trainer. And I also realized that I didn't like working for anybody else because I had no desire to wear blue gym shorts and a white button-down collared shirt. So I figured out how to start my own company, which is 27 years going strong, Brouk Moves Elite in-home personal training. And what that enabled me to do was to use my understanding from being a dancer and my innate understanding of the body to help other people in the fitness world. But I also realized that when I was going on tour, I could still make money if I hired trainers to work for me. So I was able to scale, make money while I wasn't doing anything there, and go on the road with dance companies. So I was an entrepreneur early on without really knowing I was an entrepreneur. And so that sort of taught me how to lead, stay organized, be in control of my income at all times. And from there, I was able to continue in the world of performing arts, producing shows that I wanted because my fitness company gave me the resources to do that. Not only the time resources, but the financial resources. So that side of my business enabled me to have my creative side, and moved into directing, writing, television, film, and theater. And then I started the Big Talk by accident because Petra Kolber, a friend of mine who was a fan of my work, proposed that I direct her TEDxSyracuse. And I had been a fan of TED Talks. I knew all about the forum, but I didn't really know the art form of what a TED Talk was.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my research. I worked with her, and we worked on performance. We worked on script analysis, just like with any actor. And it was fantastic. What I loved so much about it too, Joel, was that unlike actors, when you're working with a speaker, it's about the message. So it's a really inspiring process because I get to spend time with people who have something so important to say that that message is something that I get to listen to day in and day out. So after we worked together, she planted this seed, which was, you should really do this. You're kind of good at it. And I thought, okay, let me start a new company. So I started the Big Talk. Had no idea how to leverage this because I had zero credibility in the world of public speaking. So what I started doing was working with speakers. I started a podcast. John Lee Dumas planted that seed. He said, you should do a couple podcast episodes so people understand what your process is. So 169 episodes later, I think people know what my process is. And began working with speakers who wanted to work with me specifically because my point of view as a director. I'm not a coach. I'm really a director who works with speakers like I do actors.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden I have this handful of incredible speakers and nowhere to put them. And I produce theater. That's what I do. So I thought, how can I put on a show with these incredible speakers? I know, I'll apply for my TEDx license. So I applied for TEDx license. I got TEDx Lincoln Square and put on my very first event with Jamie Broderick, my co-producer, 2 years ago. March 27th, this past March, we did our second event, and it was incredible. So now I've got this podcast with all of these incredible people that talk for a living who share their information to my audience. I've got TEDx Lincoln Square, and I'm also now using my expertise as a filmmaker to help tell stories of people who have important things to do in the world, whether it's an entrepreneur or whether it's the chaplain at Rikers Island. I am helping people tell stories. And the reason Brouk Moves was such an important part of that is because it gave me the financial freedom and the time to pursue this other world. So if I can say anything to your listeners, is that opportunity is everywhere. You have to be able to see it and to make it work for you.
So you have a fantastic timeline, and there's a lot in there. And it's like, I wrote down a handful of notes that I want to really focus on, right? So like, you're doing incredible things right now, but I want to focus going right back, and we'll probably speed through some of this stuff. But you started out, you said you didn't want to be a starving artist, right? So you were a dancer, right? But you started a fitness company. Were you only working with dancers in the fitness company? Who was your ideal audience in that first fitness company?
I never worked with dancers. I worked with people who wanted to work out, who wanted to get fit, who wanted to stay fit, who wanted to have longevity in their lives. And we go to them. So this entire time, I've got zero overhead.
Yep.
And independent contractors. So it's a great way for me to have a solid and consistent income while helping people stay healthy.
So why didn't you decide to work with dancers?
Dancers couldn't afford me.
Did you learn that the hard way?
No, I knew that. Dancers can't pay. Plus, dancers know how to work out themselves.
Okay, perfect. So out of curiosity, right, when you started the fitness company, you're working with people who just want to get in shape, right? I want to know, like, how were you different? Like, how did you market yourself? Did you do anything crazy to I mean, like, because in my mind, like, you're a dancer and you're marketing to people to get healthy, right? What was the unique spin that you were doing to attract those clients in this super successful company back in the day?
The unique spin that is really who I am as Tricia Brouk and who I always continue to be is that I actually care about what I'm doing. So whether it's working with clients 27 years ago or working with speakers now, what you see is what you get. I am fully showing up for you. So that's what made me different when I was working with clients. What made us stay so relevant and maintain clients for over 27 years is that I'm very hands-on, and I train my trainers to behave and to work the same way I did. So I've created this essence of Tricia Brouk that I then send to those trainers. And I can't be in two places at once. So I don't work with my clients anymore. I certainly get on the phone with them and make sure that they're taken care of. But that machine is well oiled and has been running for so long that I can continue to just focus on showbiz and the big talk. But I think what I've done recently, Joel, because the market of personal training in New York City is so saturated, I've brought on a personal chef service with my company. So Brouk Moves is a concierge fitness and health company. And bringing on a personal chef has changed the game.
Awesome.
So it's always about adapting, adjusting, continuing to change and give the client what they need and want.
Perfect. Did you ever position yourself as a dancer, as a value add to these fitness pros, to these people who wanted to get healthy? Because you said earlier, dance professionals know how to work out, like they know how to get in shape, right? Back in the day, like, did you feel dancers were like the most experienced? This isn't going to come out right, but the most experienced workout professionals out there. Like,
what does back in the day mean first?
Well, when you were first starting out, so I'm trying to just like figure out like how you were able to position yourself going to a big city, right? You didn't know anyone. I don't know if you knew anyone, but I mean, it's new opportunity.
I didn't
right?
know anyone.
Right. But you made a specific target not to go after dancers, but you were a dancer yourself. And so I'm just kind of curious, like,
well, I think what I can say about that for sure, because I still have a lot of professional dancers who work for Brouk Moves. And what I love about hiring dancers is A, they know about the body more than anyone. B, they will show up on time. They will do what they need to do to make it happen. They're incredibly disciplined, and they're going to do more than just count repetitions.
Perfect. So they know about the body more than anybody.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, cool. So as that started to grow, right? I mean, were you still achieving your performing arts career on the side? Was this all a side gig to fund your aspirations of dancing with your idols?
Absolutely. I've never worked for anyone but myself. Being able to be self-employed my entire life is something that is epic. I never went from corporate to anything. I knew that I wanted to always perform, pursue performing arts, work in show business. And I had to figure out how I was going to do that without having the constraints of somebody telling me when I had to be in an office. So absolutely, I always knew that my showbiz career and my directing career was going to be what I did. And I needed to position myself in a way that I could make the decisions on when I was where I was.
Awesome.
And that's how I did it.
Are you still dancing today? You're still in the performing arts?
I'm in the performing arts, but I'm not actually dancing anymore.
Got it. So when did you stop dancing?
I did a show in 2007. It was a solo show. And I had been working with many choreographers my whole career who had choreographed solos on me. And I'd begun to choreograph as well. So I did an evening of dance where it was all solos. And it was very much like putting down a Zen sand sculpture. I took 9 months to do it. I methodically planned. I knew exactly what to eat. I knew exactly when to sit in between each dance so that I could get through this hour of me dancing by myself. And after it was over, it was like wiping the sand away. There was absolute happiness and peace. There was no regret. There was no, oh, I wish I could keep dancing. And that's not to say that I didn't perform later on, but my main career was, I waved goodbye to the main career of my dance background on that show, during that show.
Did you know that was going to be kind of it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Warming up gets old. I have other things to do. And that's why it's important for me to continue to keep the story moving. I have to continue to make a difference in the world and to help other people tell their stories. And if I was constantly just telling my story, many people wouldn't be able to get on the stages that I can put them on.
So what's happening in 2007 now? So let's focus in on this. You knew this was going to be it. You knew that you wanted to keep the story going. So leading up to this moment, or I'm assuming you probably had plans, and this wasn't just oh, okay, cool, I'm done after this, right? How was your fitness business going at this point? I mean, it was probably well established, right?
Oh yeah, my fitness company has been completely solid and consistent for 27 years.
Mm-hmm. So in 2007 though, was there any significance with your last performance in terms of what you're doing professionally with your business? I mean, where's the professional life taking you at this point? Or maybe this isn't a significant moment.
I think the significance behind me doing a solo show was that I wanted to be able to move on from the performance side of what I can give to the world. And then I began to pursue what it meant to write, what it meant to direct, what it meant to choreograph, and to be on the other side of the table and to lead other people in a way that I had been led up until that point.
So this was kind of the genesis of you getting into this side of the business, which is writing, directing, and choreographing, right?
Yeah, I think they merged at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I was more interested in being on the other side of the table, but I also knew that I had one more big show in me,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be able to do that.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So tell me about your first major experiences with writing and directing and choreographing, right? What was that like, right? Because I've never done it, and out of curiosity, you're huge on leadership, right? You've said time and time again that leadership is your strong suit. What you've done to make these two companies successful. So,
what I'd like to say about that, if I may, is what has completely correlated with my fitness company and with how I direct and work on sets and produce 12 speakers at TEDx Lincoln Square is that when I worked for a fitness company, that's the only company I ever worked for. And I made a promise to myself that I would never do what they did. I would do the opposite, and I would make sure that my trainers felt like they could come to me with anything. They would always get paid on time. It was a safe environment. They were supported. They knew I was their cheerleader. And that is exactly how I am on set. It's exactly how I am with any actor, with any speaker. So the direct relationship between who I became when I was starting the fitness company and who I am now is exactly the same. My job is to make you your best self so that the product can be the excellence that I demand of myself. So those two things are directly related.
mm-hmm.
If we go back to when I became a choreographer, this was a perfect example of an opportunity being presented to me and me saying yes. And I can tell you that John Turturro asked me to come to Brooklyn Academy of Music, or to Mark Morris's studio, which is over by BAM. And he said, I want you to dance with these firefighters, these New York City firefighters. And Kate Winslet is Tula. I want you to pretend like you're Tula, and I want you to dance with these firefighters. And then I did. What am I going to lose? I have nothing to lose. And then he said, can you choreograph my movie? Starring James Gandolfini, Susan Sarandon, Kate Winslet, Christopher Walken, Bobby Cannavale, Eddie Izzard, Steve Buscemi. And I said, yes. That opportunity presented itself to me. A former dancer, a friend of mine, was teaching him Pilates.
Mm-hmm.
So it came out of nowhere. And I embraced that opportunity, and it then opened up the world of show business to me.
When was that? What year?
I think it was 2005.
2005. Okay, cool. So that's fascinating. So that was your first professional experience of choreography, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So as you're going through that, right, that opened the doors to just tremendous things to happen with, essentially what you're doing now. Like, but from 2005, 2007, and to where we are now with TEDx, you said, well, not TEDx, but the Big Talk, New York City, right? We've got a gap of 9 or 10 years before the Big Talk came up. So like, what's happening then, like between that gap?
Sure. I wrote 2 musicals. I produced 2 musicals. I wrote a sitcom. I wrote a screenplay. I became the executive producer of Charlie Tango, and we raised money for a screenplay that I wrote, and I continued to create to create shows and writing, and that's what I do. And that's why I think it's so important for everybody to know that if you want to be a prolific artist, working at a restaurant is absolutely acceptable, but it's a time suck. So if you can find a way to make money when you're sitting in front of your computer writing, or when you're in the studio choreographing, or when you're on set directing, that will completely support who you are as an artist.
So with these gigs that you were coming up with, would you consider yourself a freelancer during that? Because you didn't have a formal business doing this. These were just kind of other opportunities that were popping up. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, I wouldn't call myself a freelancer. I certainly do work when somebody calls and says, I have something for you to work on. But really, I produce all of my own work.
Right.
And so that's what I was doing. I was constantly creating. I was constantly producing. If I decided I wanted to write a musical about mental illness, I did. And then I hired the actors, and then I hired the sound engineer, and then I rented the studio, and then I hired the theater, and I make shit happen.
Awesome. So, all right. So now let's fast forward up to the opportunity when you decided to say, okay, great. I got this opportunity with my friend who wanted me to, let me make sure I get this right, produce the TEDx talk in Syracuse, right?
Direct. They already had a producer. She wanted me to help her with the script and help her with the direction of it.
What goes into directing a TEDx talk? And I'm coming at it totally blind. Like I know nothing about it. So can you give me a little bit of background about what that looked like?
Sure. Well, the way I work with an actor or with a speaker is by getting them to understand what their intention is behind everything they're saying, and getting them to know what their objective is, which is what they want from an audience, and how they're going to do that, which is how they play an action. So when I'm working with a speaker or an actor, the first thing I have to do is become really vulnerable and create a safe space for them so that they can become vulnerable. Therefore, their message is extremely authentic. If they're protected because they don't trust me, we're not going to get to the most beautiful, powerful, vulnerable, impactful talk or impactful scene we can get to. So I create a safe space, and then we begin to work. And I'm extremely demanding, but I'm also incredibly loving. So that combination gets me what I need from my actors or my speakers.
Where did you learn how to do that? Create that safe space. I think it's very, very powerful. As in the webinar agency, which is what I do as my main business, we help craft messages as well. And for me personally, I wouldn't call it a safe space, but I have to get my clients to open up. How did you discover that? Like when you said the word safe space, is that just something that you came up with? But
no, this is something that many directors and people in the world of performing arts know is necessary. But what I want to say about that's important is, again, I was on the other side of the table. Mm-hmm. And when directors or other choreographers created environments that were hostile or abusive, I knew that I would never, ever do that, because you do not need to do that in order to get somebody's best work. That is absolutely not true.
Awesome. Okay, so can you keep going about the story with this first, with your friend for the TEDx talk in Syracuse, right? So you helped them create a safe space, right? So what was the intention? Like, was it a male or female?
Petra Kolber is the speaker, and her talk was called the Perfection Detox. Okay. We knew each other for many, many years. So creating a safe environment was fairly easy because she already knew who I was and we'd been social many times. And she also had seen my work. So there was a built-in trust. The first start of the process was going through her script, and really identifying what needed to be there, what didn't need to be there, when she was saying something disguised as different word combinations, but it was really the same thing. And then we'd get it on its feet and we'd start to workshop the content on its feet. So we would find out what was important, what she needed to keep, what she needed to speed up, what she needed to stand still and say, how she needed to shock the audience to get their intention at the very beginning of the talk, what kind of theatricality we wanted so that it wasn't just another TEDx. And that's something that I do. My event is what I call theatrical academia. I'm a theatrical performer. I am somebody who's been in the performing arts my entire life. I'm an artist. I'm a creative. So I put that spin on everything that I touch.
Well, I think it's extremely important too. Creativity is probably the crux of anyone who's giving a speech and giving a transformational message. How did it turn out? How did the Syracuse TEDx talk end up?
It was amazing. I was so proud of her. It was a really special and momentous moment. She felt really satisfied and fulfilled. And when you become a TEDx speaker, it opens doors. It is a really big deal. You have immediate credibility. It opens doors to future speaking gigs for any speaker that gives a TEDx. So it's a big deal.
What was the transformation from when you first looked at her first script and when you saw the final delivery? Like, how big of a change was it? And how much of an impact did you have specifically in fine-tuning that message and making sure that that was going to be the best it could be?
Well, I think what's unique about this question is that a TEDx is a very specific animal. It's different from a keynote. And Petra had been speaking all over the place. So this wasn't her first rodeo as far as getting in front of an audience talking, but it was her first experience giving a TEDx, which is an art form. It's a gift, not an ask. It's an idea, not an issue. So I had a lot of input with how to create what was truly a TEDx talk. And so how did I feel about it? I felt fantastic about it because I was able to help this colleague and this friend accomplish something that was really important. And she did it with grace, and she did it with expertise, and she did it with complete calm. So it was a win.
Amazing. So now have an awesome success story, right? You helped your friend crush it in Syracuse, right? Where did the ideas start percolating for Lincoln Square? Like, what's happening between then and
That's a great question. So Lincoln Square, TEDx Lincoln Square didn't start percolating at all. I didn't even think I would continue working with speakers. I was going back to directing and writing my own shows and doing my own thing and managing my trainers. And she said, "You should really do this." And I thought, okay, so I'll do it. So I started the process of the website design, the big talk, and began thinking about how to build credibility, get press, all the things that you get when you're starting out, all the things that you have to, roll your sleeves up and do. And I wasn't starting out. My fitness company was doing what it needed to do. And this just gave me more opportunity. And I had the time to actually pursue starting a new company, the Big Talk. So Petra then said, "You should really meet Jamie Broderick. She's amazing. She might have some people who could be speakers for you, clients for you." So I invited Jamie to New York for lunch. And by the end of lunch, now Jamie is a visibility strategist and a connector. Her company is called Success Connection. So by the end of lunch, I had hired her to take me on as a client to help me get online credibility and to help me with social media and to help me basically launch the Big Talk. So we worked together. I literally did not have a Facebook account. I was not on Facebook for conscious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And did very little bit of LinkedIn was happening. And so she really took me through online entrepreneurialism 101. And she knew what to do, and I let her do it. And part of being her client enabled me to be on a call with John Lee Dumas. And John Lee Dumas said, "Since nobody knows what you do, you should do 3 podcasts and go over your process. So I did that, loved it, realized that I have a lot to say about the art of public speaking, and I can help a lot of people tell their stories. So it's been ongoing for 2 years, 169 episodes so far. And the season that's happening right now is TEDx organizers. I interview 15 TEDx organizers about what it means to be an organizer. I try to pull back that curtain. So going back, Jamie helped me. John Lee Dumas planted the seed of starting a podcast. And then all of a sudden, speakers started coming to me. I want to do a TEDx. Great. Let's manifest it. I want to do a TEDx. Awesome. Let me help you do that. So I became an expert on the art of what a TEDx talk is and began directing speakers and helping them write, identify, write, and deliver TEDx talks. And all of a sudden I have this handful of speakers, like I said earlier, nowhere to put them. So the organic next step as a theater producer was to put on a show. So I applied for my TEDx license, went through the entire process with the TED organization. I received my license for TEDx Lincoln Square, which is the title that I picked, in November of 2015. And Jamie Broderick, who was my first mentor, said, "How can I help?" And I said, I don't actually know, but let's work together. So she became my co-producer. She's all about marketing and strategy. So she sold us out for a March event 6 weeks before the event.
Nice.
So that's how I became a TEDx organizer. I needed a place to put my speakers.
That's a fantastic story because it ties in the whole background of you being director and producer and working with all these big names and coming up with your unique expertise, which is helping people craft their message. And then ultimately it led to being very, very specific with, TEDx and now starting TEDx Lincoln Square, which is just fascinating. So during that process, when, you worked with Petra and she introduced you to Jamie Broderick, who introduced you to, John Lee Dumas, you got on his podcast. Before people started coming to you and saying, "Hey, I need help. Like, I want to get on TEDx. I want to get on TEDx." You said speakers were coming to you. Who were your primary clients? Did you have any clients at that point, or were you still marketing and trying to build the brand?
I was getting clients from word of mouth based on the publicity that I was beginning to do. Mm-hmm. So I started getting out there and speaking, being at events, allowing people to see who I was and how I worked. And because of my unique process, people started coming to me just based on referrals or based on conversations we would have about how I feel about this process. The art of public speaking is very unique when it comes to a keynote or a TEDx, but the art of shepherding someone to a stage for me is very much the same.
So what does that unique process look like? I mean, can you let us in on, how you extract these ideas? Because I know from experience, it's not easy to kind of, you really have to work at it. So what's
right? Well, one thing is if you have 100 ideas or if you have 0 ideas, both of those can cause paralysis. So what I do always is what I call an active listening session. And whether you come to me with 1 idea or 100, I ask you questions about who you are, what's important to you, why this idea or these 100 ideas are impactful to you. And we spend 2 hours talking about it. By the time an hour goes by, you're so exhausted, you break down and you start telling me everything. And that's where the real magic happens. That's where I get to see your soul. That's where I get to go inside of your head and get what's really going on with that idea. And an example of this, Joel, is Kristen Smedley, who is an incredible TEDx speaker and advocate for a retinal disease. She came to me and she'd been speaking for 16 years about retinal disease because 2 of her 3 children were born blind. So she was very passionate about wanting to raise awareness and raise money for the foundation to potentially find a cure for this rare eye disorder. So we started our first session and we were talking. 2 hours later, I said, "Kristen, this talk is actually not about the disease. This talk is about how you learn to see the world differently through the eyes of your children." And a light bulb went off. And it was the first time she realized that she had a global talk. It wasn't just specifically about this disease. It was an idea that could potentially have a global impact, which was how we see the world can be changed or shifted if we become aware of it. And if she was seeing the world through the eyes of her children, she needed to shift that because she was actually imposing her limitations on them.
That's a superpower in itself of being able to actively listen and hear the message behind the message. Because as experts, we usually fall victim to what I call the expert's curse, is we know too much and it doesn't come out like it can to make the biggest impact possible.
Right. Or you've got canned answers and you've been saying them for so long and so many times that that's what you're saying. So I get in there and I get through all of that so we can get to the real heart and soul of what your idea we're spreading is all about.
So I'm curious, like, when did this skill become noticeable for yourself? Like, when did you recognize that you had that specific skill of active listening and transforming the message? Was that after you worked with Petra on her talk, or did you kind of know you had this somewhere else?
This is something that has been part of who I am always, whether it's listening to a friend or a colleague. But honing the skill of being a really good listener comes from being a director. If I cannot hear what my actor is saying, I cannot help them have a scene that is truthful. And that is important and paramount. I need to be able to really hear what you are saying to me and take my ego out of the picture completely.
Can you repeat that again? That was so powerful. If I can't hear what you're saying as a director, can you repeat that quote?
I will try. If I can't hear what you are saying as a director, I will not be able to direct you in a way where that scene is completely truthful.
And so that basically comes down to the background of you saying leadership is everything. It's like, if I can't hear what you're saying, I will not be able to lead you properly. I think that's, in a nutshell, that is what I'm hearing across your entire journey, your entire story. That's powerful.
And I think being a leader is putting yourself in the same shoes as who you're working with. It's not about, and Lolly Daskell talks about this, it comes from within. So when I'm leading a group, whether it's my company or my speakers or my actors, if they know I'm in charge, they feel safe. Just like with kids, they need boundaries. They need to understand that they can be safe within the boundaries you are creating for them.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that about you. Like, number one, knowing that you've been able to recognize in your own sense that you have that superpower. What I've noticed over the course of the past 8 years of working with entrepreneurs and experts, so many times people don't realize like what their own superpower is. They think it's one thing, but it's really something different. Just like what you were talking about with your client with the two children who were born blind. She thought one thing, and you're like, listen, like that's kind of sort of it, but that's not the thing, right? That's not the big thing that people really want to hear, and how you're going to make the biggest impact. Super, super powerful.
It really is. It's a magical thing. I watch speakers walk onto a stage one way and off stage another.
I'm curious, when you're working with your clients and speakers, like, is there one question that you've seen, like, as you're going through this active listening session, that usually is like the light bulb moment when they're like, when they flip that switch and they start to realize for themselves that their message is transforming? Has there been one powerful question that you've seen that happen, or no? I'm just asking out of curiosity.
Sure. The process is the same, but the questions are always different. It's based on who the speaker is. And once we go through the active listening session, we go into the next phase of my process, which is what I call the blueprint session. And in that session, I've created a document. I've transcribed the active listening session in a way that is understandable. And we use that document to then create the blueprint. And this is where we go even deeper. We work on 3x5 note cards, the topic on the front based on our active listening document, and go deeper on the back. So by the time we go through this 2 or 3 hour process, we've got 20 or 30 note cards covering a table. And then I rearrange them. So the first 2 phases of the process is my heavy lifting. And once I rearrange everything, then they have a blueprint in front of them, and that's where their light bulb goes off and they see the potential of their talk. It just came to life. And that's so exciting. So I think it happens then. I think it happens on our second meeting.
So I'm very glad that you said you don't have any canned questions, right? Because that's what makes us creative, right? That's the power of being creative. Is like, okay, everybody, you want to develop systems, you want to develop processes, but like when I'm doing these shows and I'm asking questions, like I start out with like a base, but I don't want to come out with many canned questions because I want the interview to go, I want it to be fluid and dynamic. And so I think that's very, very, very powerful. But what you've also said was when you put them on the note cards, and it's like dissecting the creative process, because as speakers and as experts who are trying to craft their own message, it's all in here and they can't see it. But when you get it out and you put it on note cards so they can see it, then it starts to, I'm assuming then it starts to kind of formulate and they start to see, oh, wow, here are the connection pieces, right? Here's where the flow is coming from.
They do, or they say, oh God, I have no idea what this is. It's crazy. And that's where I say, I know, let's trust the process, because within my process, you have yours, which is why it's unique to each speaker. But the process has never let me down. And even if the speakers are scared, like, what are all these note cards? I have no idea why it's in this order. That's where the trust comes in. And if I've created that safe space, then they go away and they trust that I'm going to make sure they're okay and that the process is going to serve them.
Love it, Tricia. We're very similar in many ways, more than you probably know. But I've loved this conversation. I've loved this talk. So tell me where you're going now. Like what's on the horizon for your company?
Well, right now, the Big Talk is producing several documentaries. One is about the chaplain at Rikers Island, who is a Buddhist who teaches the correction officers to meditate. Another documentary that we produced, This Dinner is Full, is at the New York Independent Film Festival right now, and that's going to happen on May 9th. And I'm also creating a masterclass series called The Fearless Speaker, which will be coming out in the fall. And doing another season for the Big Talk, season 9, which is going to go into the studio next week. And John Lee Dumas is going to be a guest on my show, which I'm super excited about.
Nice.
And then we're going to open up the applications for TEDx Lincoln Square again in September. So things are moving.
Awesome. I'm going to ask a really dumb question, which probably should have been asked earlier on in this podcast. But can you explain to me the difference between producing and directing, the core differences?
Absolutely. The directors work directly with the actors or the speakers, and their main goal is to create a show. And by that, I mean making sure that the story is being told and that the story is being moved forward the entire time. A producer is in charge of all the details that you need to put on a show. The space, the theater, the emails to the cast, the sound engineer, the technical director, the stage manager. That's what the producer does. So that's what I do with TEDx Lincoln Square. I am the executive producer and also work with the speakers individually to make sure that they feel confident on stage. And Jamie is the marketing strategist behind the beast. So we are very clear on staying in our own lanes, and it's a beautiful collaboration because of that.
But you've done both. You've done producing and directing. It seems like those are two completely different skill sets. Like one, you have to be super detailed, and then the other is very open and yet knowing stories and knowing how to make the message sound clear.
They are very different, but the similarities for a successful director is that they're organized. And that is what a producer needs to be. So a producer is extremely detailed and organized. But me as a director, I'm still very detailed and organized. And that also creates a safe space for the actors. If the director comes in and is all over the place and doesn't know what's happening and is chaotic, the actors are terrified. So knowing that they can trust that I'm going to be on a schedule and I'm going to be very detail organized makes them feel safe.
Fantastic. Well, Tricia, I've enjoyed this episode, and we talked about a ton. We talked about, you're running two very successful companies. You've done just a number of different things in terms of you're performing arts and coming to New York without any sort of security blanket, but you knew you didn't want to be a starving artist. You're very determined. It's very, very clear. Leadership is a very strong quality, and that's apparent through this conversation. But I enjoyed how you've tied everything together of what makes a successful director and how leadership ties to that, and being able to listen to the stories and dissect their message so you can make them more impactfful and more powerful. So where can we find you? Where can we connect with you?
Well, I would love for your listeners to connect with me at Tricia at thebigtalknyc.com. And if you want to start the process of writing a big talk, you can download a free ebook called The Art of the Start. And you can get that at thebigtalknyc.com. Thebigtalknyc.com.
Awesome. So we'll have all those links in the show notes for you. If you've enjoyed this episode, guys, please reach out to Tricia. Let her know that you heard this episode, you enjoyed it. Give her some love, give her some feedback. And Tricia, thanks for being on the show. I've enjoyed this. I think that my brain has been just churning as somebody who works with people on their messages on their own. It's been fascinating to learn from another professional expert in that space. So is there anything that we missed that you want to make sure that we include?
I think we hit everything, Joel. It was a complete pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So that'll wrap up our episode today. Thanks for tuning in. Please reach out to Tricia, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to giving you the next one. Now, if you want additional trainings and content outside of the podcast, I release exclusive video trainings on my Experts Unleashed YouTube channel. And if you'd like to come hang out with thousands of other fellow experts, join our Facebook group community where we do hangouts and webinars to help support you in your journey. Finally, if you'd like my personal help to develop, launch, or scale your business, contact me directly for private consulting opportunities to see if any spots are available. And you can find all of the information above at expertsunleashed.com.